We're moving on to our next keynote speaker, and the topic for discussion here is how do you make technology human? I know a lot of us are very interested in that, and to deliver that address is Graham Stephen. I'm just going to read a little bit from his personal philosophy. I know that he doesn't particularly like his CV being talked about, but would rather have you know more about who he is than what he does. But I will tell you briefly that he has extensive experience in retail, credit, and banking, and has general management and strategy. And just to quickly read from his, because I love this, that he says, I am driven to give off my best and am intensely competitive with myself, subscribing to the mantra that good is not good enough. I believe that losing is not about coming second, but rather about not giving off your best. I believe in the power of potential. I believe in character above all else. There's lots more beautiful stuff to take from this philosophy, but let's hear from the man himself. Please, a round of applause for Graham Stephen.
Well, there's quite a turnout here today. So I usually speak in much smaller forums, so having 200, 300 people here is quite intimidating. But as they said, my name's Graham. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer of Wonga, South Africa. And I'm here to talk to you a bit about how Wonga has tried to make technology more human. So for those of you who don't know, Wonga was one of the first truly online, fully automated lending businesses, both in South Africa and in the UK. And essentially what it did is it took all human interaction out of the loan application process. So you could essentially, from the comfort of your own lounge, within 15 minutes, apply for a loan and have the money in your bank account in 15 minutes. This without ever having spoken to or engaged with another human being throughout the process. At the time, and this is going back a good 4 or 5 years before I even joined, it was revolutionary and it was a clear competitive differentiator in the market. And I think it allowed Wonga at that time to experience what was, can only be described as rapid and explosive growth. But as I'll share with you today, we've almost had to take a step back in time to truly connect with our customers, not just for the sake of connecting with them, but actually to ensure the survival and the sustainability of our business. Unfortunately, I've only got 30 minutes and probably less, given that we're running a little bit behind time. So I can't go into a huge amount of detail around that. But what I hope to cover today are 4 main things. One, I'd like to share just a few contextual thoughts around the role that technology plays in our lives today. Secondly, I want to establish whether that human experience is actually important in a world that's dominated by technology. And what role does technology play in that? Thirdly, I want to try and highlight a few critical differences between humans and machines. So what are the things that make humans human? And finally, I'd share a few practical stories about how we at Wonga have brought back the human into what is a technology-driven business. So let's take a look at the slide. How often do we see this scene playing out in our daily lives? Whether it's a family at a restaurant, sitting around eating, but not talking to each other, but WhatsApping on their phones. Any of you have been to Cavendish or one of the shopping centers? You see the teenagers in the food malls. When I was growing up, we spoke to each other. Or you're sitting in a business meeting or presentation, and the people around the table aren't actually listening, but they, doing other work on their laptops or their phones. And don't think I can't see you putting your phones away now. But it's almost a paradox. Because on the one hand, technology has brought massive speed, it's brought convenience into our lives, it's connected people across the world together. We can get an Uber from the palm of our hand. We can be sitting in our lounge and we can order any conceivable item, service, or whatever without even getting up off our couch. On the other hand, it plays out in this scene depicted above. Even though people are connected across geographies, families and friends no longer talk to each other, where colleagues are never fully present in a meeting or an engagement. I mean, I guess we could argue that technology has literally taken over our lives. But I think we need to balance it out a little bit. So let me ask you, what do you see in this picture? Some of you might see a baby with his hands up in the air. Some of you might see the owls on the baby grow. Others of you might see some dodgy flannel pajamas at the bottom of the picture, or a couple of old fogies on a screen. But if you look a little bit deeper, what do you really see? How many of you can see the sparkle in the child's eyes as he's sitting in Johannesburg, sees his grandparents in Auckland, 15,000 kilometers away? How many can hear his laughter as he chats to his Oma and Opa on the screen? So 20 years ago, none of this would have been possible. And I think it shows that technology truly has the ability to make connections. Facebook's mission statement, and to paraphrase it, it says, is to build communities that bring the world closer together. But I think to enable that, we need to avoid the hype. We need to stop thinking about technology for technology's sake. As Steve Jobs so eloquently said, he said, you have to start with the customer experience first and work backwards towards the technology, not the other way around. And I think what he was saying, in essence, is technology is the enabler. It's not the end in itself. And so if we wish to make technology more human, we need to be reminded of that. So the question is, what is the secret sauce that makes humans human? If we can establish that, perhaps we can establish what it is that we need to do to make technology more human. And today I'd like to focus on three things. I'd like to speculate that the first is purpose. People have an innate desire to have purpose in what they're doing. It's the age-old question of meaning. The second is about connection. People want to feel connected. We're social creatures, you know. We need to engage with other people. It's in that feedback loop, you know, of responses and other people giving us feedback that makes us feel accepted. It makes us feel part of something bigger. And the third point, you know, it's connected to the second one, is around listening. And by that I mean active, engaging listening. It's something that only another person can do, that a machine can't really do. I'd like to just show a couple of examples how some people have challenged this, namely Facebook and Apple. So we all know what those are. Those are Facebook emojis. Up until fairly recently, only the like button existed. It was only a bit later that the love, the ha-ha, the wow, the sad, the angry came around. But what these things do is it allows other people, whether it's friends or families, to express what they think about your post or your photo or whatever you're putting on Facebook. And when you receive this feedback, it either validates or it affirms you, and it completes this feedback loop, sending a rush of dopamine to your brain and making you feel good. It's good to know that your friends and family like what you're posting and what you're doing in your life. Let me ask a hypothetical question and see how quickly this could potentially unravel. So how would you feel if tomorrow in the press it came out that Facebook emojis and responses weren't generated by other people? In fact, Facebook had an algorithm in the background that randomly assigned the number of likes or wows or whatever to your photos or to your posts. Okay. What if you were a narcissistic selfie king and that came out? I mean, you'd probably feel devastated knowing that this was just some machine giving you all these likes. How would Facebook decide who gets the most likes, who gets angry, who gets sad? Would you be okay with that? You know, would you feel that Facebook potentially was a fraud or not? But I think the point is that, you know, that feedback has to be authentic. It's got to be human. Let's take a look at a clip here. I think this was on the Ellen show. Some of you might have seen it. It just illustrates the second point around how machines Listen to us.
Call Nana.
Calling Deanna.
Send text message to Eric.
Okay, I can send a text to Eric for you. What would you like it to say?
Bouncy ball, no bouncy ball, no bouncy ball.
Okay, I'll send it.
Siri, can you make my lunch? I think this is super fun.
Not as such.
Huh. And crashed into toast.
So that's just a really light-hearted clip. But I think it displays rather aptly how machines still have a really long way to go in terms of having a truly human engagement and being able to listen to what we're saying, never mind making toast. So far, I hope we've managed to establish a couple of things. That despite living in a world dominated by technology, I think the human experience is still critically important. That technology is an enabler of that human experience. And also what fundamentally differentiates us from machines is one, a sense of purpose, a sense of connection, and the need to be heard or listened to. I'm going to share with you now how we at Wonga try to bring these elements together in our business in order to humanize what was a digital experience. So as I mentioned up front, Wonga was one of the original fintech pioneers. Its success was built off, automation, both in process and decision making. As a digital short-term provider, as I said earlier, you could get a loan in minutes from the comfort of your home. Speed was absolutely everything. I'm sure many of you will remember I think painful jingles sometimes years ago, the fast little loan jingles, the Wongies. And even the Wongies weren't real, they were puppets. They were caricatures, they were abstractions of people. And in fact, we took a lot of flack over that, about stereotyping people. But at the time, Wonga was flying. It was experiencing rapid growth. It was, on track to become the next unicorn. And then a mini crisis hit, both in the UK and in South Africa. And in South Africa in particular, new lending regulation meant that things changed. For example, the regulation meant that we had to physically verify customers' income. They had to provide us with 3 months' bank statements. We had to have somebody inspect those, check what the income was and confirm that. And all of a sudden, that speed and convenience, which was the competitive advantage, was now under threat. So while looking inwards to try to understand the impact of this, we realized that it wasn't just that speed and convenience that was under threat, the whole business model was under threat. We also realized it wasn't good practice to simply give lots and lots and lots of short-term loans to customers over and over again. It wasn't good business practice. We were putting people into debt spirals. And we didn't even understand what the customers wanted the money for, what they were using it for. And through this process, we realized that 3 things really mattered in our business. Yes, I'm sure you've guessed it by now. Firstly, we realized we didn't have a purpose. We needed to understand our purpose. Why were we in business? Was it simply to make shareholders rich? We realized that connections matter. Speed and convenience was no longer enough. People want to feel connected to something. And it was both our staff and our customers. They wanted to be part of something bigger. And finally, our people and customers wanted to feel heard. They wanted to complete this feedback loop. They wanted us to hear their recommendations, their suggestions. So we embarked on a business turnaround strategy with these 3 principles at the core. And in focusing on these 3 principles, that's when I think we started to make technology more human. And I'm going to highlight an example of each of these. So at the center of it, we needed to define our purpose. In many people's eyes, I think still today, we're seen as unscrupulous payday lenders with no heart or soul, indiscriminately putting poor people into a debt spiral that they've got no hope of getting out of. But as we started to talk to our clients and we started to engage in the market, we realized that in South Africa, there was a much bigger social issue at play. Credit, provided it's provided responsibly, with the appropriate education, actually has the power to uplift communities and people. It can be an enabler to people's lives. And in the South African context, many people simply did not have access to credit, either because they didn't know how, or it was, they couldn't take time off from work to go stand in a queue at a bank, or because they didn't have a credit history, which precluded them from getting access to credit in the first place. Things we take for granted, like study loans, vehicle finance, home loans. And we came to the conclusion that the real power in this fast little loan was not the loan itself. This was a very consumption-driven approach. Yes, our loans are fast, they are little, they are easy to get, okay? But it was really in the possibility that by taking a small loan and meeting a real need in that, so whether it was a burst tire or whether it was your child's school fees, you can meet that need, but you can also create a profile which opens the doors to access to credit. And from that, it helped us in defining our purpose. And that was helping people own their possibilities. And the 4 logos at the top represent the principles, the values that underpin that. And that's being people first, pioneering, principled, and positive. And this was the first step in us actually acknowledging that although we were a digital and a technology business, that real live human beings, customers and staff, were at the center of it all. But the question was still, so what? Okay, we had a purpose. But without execution, it meant absolutely nothing. We actually needed to show real intent, and we needed to make connections. And this moves me on to the second point. I'll explain a bit what this picture means in a sec. But as a fully digital business, we had spent all our time and effort on looking after the techies. We had invested heavily in a slick user interface, a user journey, customer experience. But while our digital customer journey and experience, catered for customers 80% of the time, the happy path, we started to realize that it was the 20% of the time when customers couldn't get what they wanted that was actually the problem. Be it because their web browser was unsupported or they didn't have an appropriate credit score. And we realized that this 20% actually presented us an opportunity to truly engage with our customers. Most of us talk about, it's just the edge case. How often have you heard that term? But the edge case, we realized that at best, these edge case customers would be ambivalent to our brand. At worst case, they would be active dissenters. We realized we had an opportunity to turn that around. How could we make these people, true brand advocates? And Yaron comes in the connection center. It's not a call center. It's not a customer service center. This picture depicts a desk of one of our connection center agents. It's a space where customers have an opportunity to make real connections with us. And we took a different approach. And I'm going to read out the quote on screen there from Kristen Smaby. It says, in an era where companies see online support as a way to shield themselves from costly interactions, it's time to consider an entirely different approach, building human-centric customer service through great people and clever technology. So get to know your customers, humanize them, humanize yourself. It's worth it. When somebody has a problem, they want to feel heard. So when designing our connection center, we drew on personal experience, we did global research, and what we noticed is that most call centers around the world look the same. Their apparent intent was to route traffic rather than solve problems. From layers of IVR to robotic agents simply following a script. I think most of us see contacting a call center as a necessary evil. How many of you have tried to, resolve a query, anything more than a simple billing inquiry with one of our MNOs? Or heaven forbid, try get a fiber line installed in Cape Town. So in keeping with our principles of being people first, principled, positive, we tried something different. And it started with our agents. We wanted them to bring their whole selves to work. Just because you're at work does not mean you're a different person. Okay, unless you're somebody who sort of eats pizza all day and walks around in your underwear at home, then we don't want you to bring your whole self to work. But when you get to work, you know, you're still a mother, you're still a brother, you're still an adventure seeker. And we wanted our agents to experience that when they got to work. And secondly, we did away with call scripts. When customers phoned in, we wanted them to have an engaging experience with our agents. We wanted them to have a conversation. We didn't want them to follow a process. And although the results weren't instantaneous, what we did start to see is that the sentiment had started to shift. That the feedback we were getting was that customers were truly blown away by having a real conversation. They were surprised and delighted. And this coming from a technology company, a digital business, it was completely unexpected. And even though it was a negative experience that had brought them to the connection center in the first place, they felt human. They felt that somebody cared and that they could engage with them. But we also realized that while the sentiment had improved, the number and frequency of calls coming through to the connection center had not. And this brings me to the third point. There we go. As Ernest Hemingway once said, I like to listen. I've learned a great deal from listening carefully. Most people never listen. And accepting the notion that, purpose and connection had not led to actual change in our business, we looked at the third component of listening. So we sought to see how truly listening to our staff and our customers could bring about a positive change. So while our agents were engaging in what we call active listening with our customers, it seemed to stop there. It was at the transaction level, at the individual engagement level. And we needed to elevate things up a level. We needed to elevate them to understand what was the underlying cause of customer frustration. How could we truly humanize our process? How could we get 100% of people on our happy path? And herein we came up with, it's a very simple concept. It's used in call centers the world over, of call listening. Now, call listening is nothing new. It's nothing novel. But I think the purpose is usually for quality assurance or for, rating agent performance in a call center. And I think we introduced this with a very different intent. We introduced it with the intent to truly bridge the gap between our connection center agents, our customers, our techies, everyone in the business. Like most businesses, we still had disconnects between what the business was saying, what credit was saying, what our customers were saying, what the call center was saying. We had three floors in our building. The connection center was down on the first floor. Management was on the third floor. And we wanted to bridge that gap. So what we did is we made it compulsory for everyone, from the tea lady to the CEO. Every month, everyone has to spend an hour a month side by side with a connection center agent listening to calls. I don't think we're brave enough yet to kind of let some of those loose into real conversations. They're not adequately trained and what have you to do that. But it's the responsibility of everybody in the business to take our customers seriously and to humanize that. So I'll briefly talk about what we did. Essentially, the process was simple. Once a month, you go and you sit down with a connection center agent. We had an electronic feedback form. And we assessed two things. We had some qualitative factors and some quantitative factors. The quantitative factors, broadly speaking, were CSAT. So you, as the listener, would have to say, what score do you think the customer would give the agent in the engagement? Our NPS score, would you, as a listener, recommend Wonga to your friends and family based on what you had heard or listened to? The customer effort score. So how easy or hard was it for the customer to actually engage in that conversation? And the first-time resolution. So was the query that the customer had resolved in that interaction, first time around? And then more importantly almost was the qualitative measures. So what was the issue at hand? How could we solve this systematically? How could we change our process, our UI design, whatever, to make sure that this problem never happened again? From there, the feedback's collated, and once a month we have a tech development prioritization session where we look at all these things, and we assess it against what we call the Triple Crown. Triple Crown rating is a very simple measure. It looks at, does it generate revenue? Does it improve cost efficiencies? And most importantly, does it enhance the customer experience? This is then prioritized into our tech roadmap and then actually delivered. I'll give a very simple example. We noticed at month end, we got a spike in phone calls around customers asking to confirm that they had settled their loan. Okay, now month end is when we do most of our business. It was becoming a problem. And typically the solution would be go and create an IVR where you can automate that. And the solution was actually even more simple than that. We simply realized that we knew when customers paid us, and we started sending out SMSs to every single customer who made a payment to say, thank you for your payment, your loan is now settled. And that came through this process. And again, it seems like it's not rocket science, it's really simple. And from there, our progress is monitored, and I think what we started to see is a real change in our customer experience. But also what we've seen is the engagement in the business. Everybody feels part of the business now. It's not the call center agents on the first floor versus management on the third floor. Everybody feels part of engaging with that customer. It's about those things that make technology human, that make businesses human. So I'm going to briefly just recap. We focused on three things: creating a purpose for our business, truly connecting with our customers, listening to both our customers and agents. And while the process is ongoing, we've seen tangible improvements across these measures. We've seen an improvement in engagement with our customers and staff. We've seen improved team collaboration and integration, staff ownership and accountability, and obviously transparency across teams. It's not everybody trying to cling on to their idea, the techies coming up with great ideas or business coming up with novel ways to make more money. At the end, these are the things that make humans feel human. They make us feel that we're part of something bigger. But it doesn't stop there. We are in business. We're not a charity. And we started to see a turnaround in our actual metrics. These things which, for the preceding 12 months before we introduced these processes, had seen no movement. They were pretty much flat. And within a 3-month period, we saw over 30% improvement in our live chat customer satisfaction scores. Our email handling time reduced by 70%. Our IVR, our income verification, this is when we inspect documents, handling time reduced by 60%. And our drop calls reduced by over 40% within 3 months of introducing this. And these are leading metrics, and we also saw a fundamental improvement in the harder metrics of profitability, customer engagement. But I don't have time to go into that. That's for another discussion. So before I end my presentation, I want to share one final story with you. And this story is about the orange person in the middle of this picture. It's a story of one customer. It's a true story, and it's the story of Lisa. Lisa is a single mom from Mitchell's Plain. She works a double shift in a textile factory. Despite that, she only earns 4,000 Rand a month. Now, Lisa was obviously desperate. 6 weeks ago, at 2:30 on a Friday afternoon, Lisa arrived at the Wonga offices. Now, Wonga is a digital business. We don't have branches. We've got a website. But needless to say, she took an afternoon off work and arrived at our head office in Bree Street. While she was standing at security, one of our connection center agents, Dean, walked in and he started chatting to her. And she said, she's here to see Wonga. So he said, what do you mean? So he said, no, she's got a problem trying to apply for a loan. So Dean started to have a chat to Lisa. And he realized that she had heard about Wonga, but she didn't even know how to apply. So he went and he sat down at his terminal, and he tried to apply for a loan with her. And he realized then that she didn't have an email address, one of the requirements we need to apply for a loan. So he called one of his supervisors, Keenan, who came down and sat, and they tried to create a Google Mail account for her, went through the application, they got stuck. So not being guys to give up, they came upstairs to the third floor and they found Kirsty. Kirsty's our head of customer experience. Kirsty went down and started chatting, trying to help the process, still couldn't come right. At which stage, they went across to our tech team and got hold of Lauren. Lauren is our product owner in charge of front end. Anyway, at this stage, Lisa started to feel a little bit overwhelmed. Okay. She had come just to kind of come to the branch, so she thought. But now everybody was in trying to solve her loan. And we could see she was overwhelmed. So she actually said she wanted to go home. So we chipped in. And everybody chipped in $10 and $50 for a taxi fee back home. But she gave us permission to keep trying to apply for the loan on her behalf. About half an hour later, I was in a meeting, and Kirsty came across to me and said, listen, we've got this customer who's gone home, and it's left me feeling like we can't help her. What can we do? So I said to Kirsty, give her a call. So Kirsty phoned her later that afternoon, and she started chatting to Lisa. And she said, Lisa, tell me a bit about yourself. It turns out that this is when we found out that she was a single mom. Her daughter was in grade 9 at Tafelsig High School, and she'd received a final demand from the school to pay her school fees for the balance of the year. And she was desperate for a loan. She didn't want to go to her employer because they didn't give staff loans anymore. And she was too embarrassed to go to her friends and family and to ask them for a loan. So she had come to us. Now, obviously, we're not a charity. We can't hand out money to people. But we didn't stop there. We had a chat the next Monday morning at our management meeting, and we decided, look, we've got to be able to do something for Lisa. So our head of marketing, Taryn, came up with a suggestion. He said, well, why don't we do a focus group of one? And we phoned Lisa and we said, look, we weren't able to help you, but we'd really like to understand your journey. We'd like to understand your story. And she agreed to come in one Friday afternoon to come and sit with us, come and sit with our tech developers, with marketing. We filmed her. We asked her story. And it got quite emotional. There were lots of hugs and lots of tears, Can you imagine now, a single person with 10 other people in the room trying to interrogate you? And at the end of the day, we gave her a gift. It so happened that envelope, when she got home, she opened it up, happened to have enough money for her daughter's school fees. And she burst out in tears. She was blown away by this experience. She contacted KFM and she asked for a dedication to go out. She asked for a photo of us because she was never going to forget this day. And we still stay in touch with her and chat to her. So all in all, there was this one customer. We spent 6 hours, 10 staff members trying to solve one customer's problem in a digital business. And I think that, for me, is about making technology human. And in closing, that's a picture of the grade 9 class at Tafelsig High School. But in closing, I'd like to just share one thing, and I am out of time. At the end of the day, it's about having a purpose. It's about connecting. It's about listening to people. But I think there's one final thing that can make technology human, and that's the people in your business. It's the people who have passion and commitment and really understand what you're there for, who really want to go out of their way to make other people's lives better. And it's about employing those right people. And today I want to do something slightly different. I just want to acknowledge 3 of those people. They're in the room. So if Kirsty, Evie, and Barbara can please stand, maybe just put your hands up. There we go there. And Shelley as well. I think Shelley's here. And I'll just end by saying, please take the time during the lunch breaks, during the tea breaks, go and have a chat to the 3 or 4 of them, and just ask them, how do we make technology human? Thanks for your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Graham, thanks very much. That was
Thank you.
fantastic, because I was a bit of an unbeliever of Wonga. And it's interesting for me that...
As was I before I joined.
It's interesting for me that many of the changes that you've demonstrated here that companies are able to make happened through crisis. So you talk about the change of regulation that occurred. I mean, you even got the attention of the Archbishop of Canterbury in the UK, which is pretty unique. But out of crisis sometimes comes good things. So thank you very much for that. Thank you.
you.
Okay.